You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends. This is the part that they call the ramble. The ramble where I make up shit and I just wing it right off the top of my head and I say whatever I'm thinking. And clearly I'm not thinking anything because I'm just defining the ramble in the intro. So there you go. I just cheated, really, when it comes down to it. But there you go. I mean, we make up something different every time. I've had friends say to me, we just go listen to the intros, Chris, for whatever the hell you're going to make up. But we really appreciate you guys being here. We have an amazing author on the show. He comes all the way from over what they like to say, the pond in the UK, in the Britain area. I think he's from Cambridge. He's not from London. I was going to say London. Is London close to Cambridge? I'm not sure.
It's pretty close.
Yeah. It's all English, right? So Old English. We have to disclose that. The attorneys say we have to disclose Old English because we know America is, number one. Anyway, moving on. Those damn asshole Americans. What can you do with them? Anyway, we have an amazing gentleman on the show. He's going to be talking about his latest book. We're going to be talking about the environment, a cleaner future in the secret world of waste. His book is entitled Wasteland, and I think it's a novel about my dating habit. No, it is coming out. It just came out July 18th, 2023. Wasteland, the secret world of waste and the urgent search for a cleaner future, which probably also is my dating future. Oliver Franklin-Wallis is on the show with us today. He's going to be talking to us about his amazing book and insight into a shocking journey into the waste industry and the secretive multi-billion-dollar world that underpins the modern economy. And we're going to find out more. But before that, let's get to know him a little bit better off his bio. Oliver is an award-winning magazine journalist whose writing has appeared in GQ. I've offered to appear in their magazine for The Most Sexiest Man. They're considering it. Wired, The Guardian, New York Times. No, they're not doing that. The Economist, and many other publications. Wasteland, his newest book, is his first book and newest book, I should say. And I'm just wanting to reiterate that. Welcome to the show, Oliver. How are you?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I was thinking there in your beautifully executed ramble, like whether you were going to make a trash joke, because often people do, and it's like trash talk is an option, or if it's late, depending on where you are and how late it is, we can get into dirty talk later on if you want. But wow. Yeah, there's a lot of puns, and you didn't go for it, so I feel I feel like we missed an opportunity there.
Okay, we
can make up for it later.
Show, we're going to hit rewind, and we're going to start over. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I'll let you slide some of those in because you probably have assembled some in your thing. So welcome to the show. Congratulations on the new book. Give us a .com wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs, please.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can find me at oliverfranklinwallis.com. Easy. All good bookstores, some mediocre bookstores. You can, wherever. I think you mentioned like my day job. I'm an editor at GQ magazine, so a lot of your readers might know that, and various other bits and pieces. This is a very different world than celebrities and fashion. There's a bit of fashion in there. We might touch on it, but it tends not to be the same vibe.
Is GQ still like a good men's sort of magazine there? I think it was always. You go there for your nice suits and stuff.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. And if you need me, for that sexiest man list, and you just let me know where to submit my pictures, and you can check my Tinder profile and stuff. Anyway, moving on. What motivated you, Oliver, to write this book?
Yeah, sure. There's a long version of the story. There's a short version of the story. I'm going to give you the short version, which is it started interesting me not that long ago when everyone suddenly started noticing, well, there's all this plastic in the ocean and all this I was going to swear there, but I better not. Stuff going on in our rivers and things like that. And I was just like, where has all of this stuff come from? And at the same time, I did this piece for The Guardian about the fact that China, which for a long time, from the second half of the 20th century, was like the preeminent destination for a lot of our garbage. A lot of people don't know that the things you're throwing away for like recycling was being loaded onto container ships and, on the West Coast, in your case, and sailed over the Pacific to China, and in some cases recycled and often not. And 2018 or so, they said, no, we're kind of done with that. We don't want to be the world's trash can anymore. Shut their doors. And ever since, we've kind of been like wondering what to do with it. And I was kind of intrigued by that notion at the time. But the thing that kind of caught me in it is like, we spend a lot of time thinking about where our stuff comes from. Is it organic? Is it fair trade? Is it this or is it that? But we never really think about what happens to it after we throw it away. And a lot of time, the journey is just as long and just as complicated and just as interesting. So yeah, this is my kind of attempt to find out, and it was pretty wild at the time.
There you go. I thought the plastic in the ocean give it that shininess when you look out across the horizon. Oh man, I'm gonna get hate mail from Greenpeace now.
Well, we were just talking off the air about the story that I was doing for The Economist a while back about submarines. And, I went on this research boat in the Pacific, and you would just be like sailing in the middle of nowhere. And occasionally you just see like a load of plastic just kind of floating on by. So I think maybe that, that was many years ago now. And maybe that kind of planted the seed back in my mind.
There you go.
But yeah, you see it everywhere. It's kind of crazy.
And it looks like you travel the world. You go to Ghana, I believe. And
yeah, so I did the UK, the US, India, and Ghana. Mm-hmm. A lot of this reporting happened during the pandemic, so you couldn't get into a lot of places. So I went wherever they'd have me. But yeah, it's a fairly global journey, and it's all sorts of different things. So it's like not just plastic, which I'm sure we'll talk about. It's clothing, it's electronics, it's sewage, it's food. It goes all the way. I think the last chapter is nuclear waste, which is kind of pretty heavy. Yeah, but I stood in a room which looked like a missile silo out of a Bond movie, where they store all of the Europe's nuclear waste in these kind of super thick tubes that's going to be radioactive for 10,000 years, and that was kind of interesting and wild.
Craziness. So yeah,
you can still feel the heat. It's like they're like I think they're like 2 or 3 meter deep plugs, and you can still feel like warmth coming out of them, like even with all of the crazy levels of safety and stuff going on, to give you a sense.
Should you be able to feel the warmth?
Well, maybe. I was a little bit surprised, but they give you a little Geiger counter. Like you wear this little alarm thing. You go in and you've got to wear these special shoes and safety helmet and all this kind of stuff. And you wear a little alarm, and then when you kind of come out, they like check you basically to make sure that you're not radioactive. I'm not sure, like if the alarm goes off, like what do they do? Like I never really thought to answer that question, but if maybe they would have just kept me in there.
It's probably like that movie with Cher back in the 70s or 80s where she's at 3 Mile Island or whatever, and they have to give her the soap bath and scrub her down and shit.
I imagine
probably not gonna end well. So how did you approach this journey? Like how did you say, okay, how are we going to paint this picture? How did you tackle this? Because it seems like it's a very big, there's a couple of things of garbage out there.
Yeah, because and it's a kind of weird thing to get your head around. But from one sense, this is a book about trash and garbage, and that feels like something small. But then once you start on this journey, you realize, well, actually, the story is of everything. Everything, we have to dispose of everything at the end of its lifespan. Eventually, like going from the tiniest thing up to bulldozing, like TNTing power plants and like blowing up power plants and scooping all away. And so I had to kind of work out which of the things that I wanted to follow. And so a lot of the time it was focusing on the things that we use most common in our everyday life. So there's the story of paper. There's the story of like a plastic bottle. There's what happens to your thrift store donations, for example, your old iPhones.
Yeah.
But something that kind of became very clear to me early in the stage of the reporting is like, there are essentially 3 forms of waste. There's the kind of the regular everyday trash that you throw away in your bin. There's what they call in the industry putrescible waste, which is a lovely word, but essentially means stuff that decomposes, like food and sewage, the stinky stuff, essentially.
Bodies.
None of it smells great, but yeah, bodies, yeah. The stuff that decomposes. And then there's this like third category, which is kind of like the dangerous, sticky stuff, which is like toxic waste, industrial waste, the nuclear stuff, the stuff that's really difficult. And so like the last third of the book is like what you do with that. And I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but like a big challenge with this industry and with all of our environmentalism is like a lot of our world is like filled with these toxic chemicals and stuff that you don't see every day now, and microplastics and all these things. We're only really starting to get to grips with the impact they're having on the environment and on our bodies. So yeah, I hope that people can kind of see the threads and that the journey makes sense.
Yeah, I love microplastics and some of that forever chemicals. I sprinkle that on my Cheerios every morning and gets that extra zip. That extra zip of flavor. You know, you realize you're going to have a whole mess of people on your Amazon reviews going, "This book is trash." And
I actually at one point genuinely pitched my publisher, and I said that we should have "This Book is Garbage" as the title, and then I could be like, "Ha ha! Yes, it is, my friend." Yeah, I'm fully acknowledging that there will be puns and abuse and things, but I lean into it. You've got to embrace it with two hands.
Now, I've got your book here. Is this fully recyclable? That's just what I don't know. I don't see a recyclable.
It is. It is fully recyclable. Yeah.
There you go. So
you can use it as a paperweight or put your laptop on it. You know, there's all sorts of uses you can.
And you can read it too. That's
you could read it. Yeah. Some people do.
There you go. Hi, folks. Chris Voss here with a little station break. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We'll resume here in a second. I'd like to invite you to come to my coaching, speaking, and training courses website. You can also see our new podcast over there at chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Over there, you can find all the different stuff that we do for speaking engagements if you'd like to hire me, training courses that we offer, and coaching for leadership, management, entrepreneurism, podcasting, corporate stuff. With over 35 years of experience in business and running companies as CEO. And be sure to check out chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Now back to the show. And so let me ask you this. I know people really need to get into the details of the book and everything else, but are we really saving anything with plastic and paper straws? Did you get into any of that in the book?
Oh, you mean like changing plastic straws to paper?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah, and this is a really interesting area because something that happens, and this is true of the whole wider environmental movement area, any kind of environmental issue, is that when you identify a bad guy, you know, like what happened was all of a sudden we started seeing these pictures of turtles with their heads and like beer rings and things like that. And everyone went, okay, well, we need to find a solution. And a bunch of canny entrepreneurs and people in the business world went, okay, well, we can sell these alternatives. So you have, you know, all these keep cups and tote bags and all these, like, this whole green industry suddenly moved and started basically saying, well, the solution is to buy different stuff, which in a lot of ways doesn't really solve the problem. But in a few cases, they're better, right? Like, so a paper straw is more recyclable than a plastic straw. So, like, I think, you know, weight for weight, they're probably it's probably an improvement. But you do have this thing where a bunch of the replacements are actually worse. So, for example, now it's difficult to say the word worse, but they're complicated. Let's say the word they're complicated. So, for example, you can recycle a plastic, you know, let's say you want to use a beer glass, a plastic beer cup, the kind that you might get at a music festival or something. Mm-hmm. And it's made out of PET, which is a very common plastics. That's the kind of thing your Coke bottle is made of. And that's a pretty recyclable plastic. It's recycled all over the world. And what happened was, particularly during the pandemic, and I saw it a lot in my own life, is that we saw a lot of places swapping those out for compostable. Is that how you pronounce it over there? Compostable plastics, these alternatives, these kind of new bioplastics and things. And the idea is that they break down. Mm-hmm. The problem is that it turned out that a lot of those new materials are only designed to break down in these like high-tech industrial compost facilities, with like under heat and pressure, you know, and you know, certainly in the UK, there's very few of them, and there's nobody collecting them to take to those places, right? So you were replacing this recyclable product, which, you know, plastic has lots of other problems, you know, that I'm not saying that plastic is good by any means, but we took something that was recyclable and we replaced it with something that people thought were being composted, but no one really thinks, oh, hang on a minute, I didn't put this in, you know, there's no compost bin. And so they all ended up burned. So you get this weird thing where it's like, okay, well, we swapped something bad for something that's just bad in another way. And it turns out that there's all sorts of examples of this throughout the industry. And so you kind of have to say to people, it's sometimes a difficult conversation to say, well, hang on a minute, let's not maybe rush, because, You know, a lot of the times there's no good choices, there's just choices, and we need to sometimes lean into a bit of the complexity in some of these cases.
There you go. You know, it's one thing we have over here too. I don't know if you guys have in the UK, but they made this thing where they wouldn't give you paper bags anymore. They're like, yeah, we're not giving you paper or plastic bags. You got to buy this canvas piece of shit that probably isn't compostable in any way, shape, or form. You know, it's like thick and heavy. And they're like, hey, you got to put all your groceries in there. Meanwhile, all your groceries come in like giant plastic, oversized. Like I saw a TikTok video recently, and the guy goes, "Oh, here's my, you know, my special bag from the grocery bag," and then he pulls out like every product just covered in plastic and giant, like his chicken. He had some like roasted chicken. It was like this giant plastic thing, and especially if you go to like Costco. I don't know if you guys have those.
For sure.
Warehouse stores, but you go to Costco and like
layers upon layers, like past the parcel.
Yeah, it's like half an acre of plastic, and so it's kind of, I don't know. And people are like, I'm saving the planet and shit, and you're just like, are you really? I don't know.
Well, this is the thing. Like, you know, tote bags is a great example. You know, and I should say I made a joke about this because one of the worst industries for this stuff is the publishing industry. The publishing industry loves tote bags for some reason. But you know, you take something, you know, something like a plastic bag, you replace it with a tote bag. Well, what have you got to do? You've got to clear cut a load of forest and grow a load of cotton. And there was this Dutch, I think it was Dutch study. There was a study done in Europe which found that you had to use, in order for it to be environmentally beneficial, you have to use these things thousands of times. I don't have the exact figure in time, but it was like multiple thousands of times before they're better. Wow. Which, so if you suddenly, you know, I've probably got 20 of these things now. Most of those are not going to get used thousands of times. So, but this is the thing where like a lot of the solution is just, okay, maybe we just don't need a bag at all. But that's, you know, sometimes the obvious choice is the harder one to choose. The thing you said about plastic is so true. Like you go to the supermarket now, you go to Whole Foods, wherever it is, maybe not Whole Foods, but if you go to Walmart or whatever, and you have all these fruit and vegetables and everything packed with layers and layers of it. And the packaging industry or the food industry for a long time, their excuse was, oh, okay, it will make things last longer. It's like fresher and all these kind of things. And very rarely, it turns out is that actually true. It's just practical for them, right? It's just like practical logistics. Wow. But you get this side effect, which is that, you know, if you're a single person and living in Manhattan or whatever, and you go to the supermarket, you go to Costco, it's like, do you want large or extra large? Like you want to buy a bag of salad leaves, and it's like you can buy 2 kilos or 5 kilos, but you can't buy, you know, a lettuce or something.
And it's covered in 5 kilos of plastic.
It's well, exactly. But you also get loads and loads of food waste. And if you want a kind of mind-blowing figure, a third of all food grown worldwide is wasted. It's never eaten.
Really?
A third of all food waste. Between 8 and 10%, according to the IPCC, between 8 and 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions is caused by food waste. Right?
Wow.
That feels wild, but then you think about that practically. So 28% of all farmland worldwide is being wasted. It's being used to grow food that's never eaten by people. Wow. If you add up the hectares of like all that farmland, you could cover the subcontinent of India with farmland that's being wasted. So like the figures are just kind of mind blowing. And the great thing is the opportunity there is that it's like low hanging fruit in terms of like, if you want to cut carbon emissions, then you just need to, you know, take away some food, cut some food waste, buy less vegetables, and make sure we're eating what we're growing. And it's like there's a real opportunity there. So I just try and it's kind of scary figures, but also I like to see the upside.
Those are extraordinary figures, you know. And here we have human hunger everywhere. Like,
I think 820 million hungry people in the world, I think, is the current figure.
Are we just what is our problem? You can discover that in our book. What our problem is, human beings.
I think that's a separate book. It's going to require a lot of.
We just need a couple of hits across the head or something with a plane. Like what's going on there? You know, tell me if I have any bearing of this. And this is kind of a joke, but I always do. But you know, I'll have these friends that I'll be at a party or something on Facebook, and they're like, "Hey, you know, I'm single." And I live my life, and I have plastic forks, plastic knives, and plastic spoons, and paper plates. And that's how I go about my life. It's me and my 2 dogs. I'm 55 years old, never been married, never been divorced, never got tired of being happy. And And so I eat that way. And so sometimes I'll take a picture of something nice food I made, like a crazy salad, and people will give me back, oh, you're eating those plastic forks. You're filling the environment. And I'm like, hey man, I'm one guy. I didn't have any kids. So it dies with me. Like I'm Mr. That's just me, my world. You had 4 freaking kids, and probably about 50% of them. So basically there's you and your wife, and you had a kid. So since there's 2 of you, you've increased the quotient of garbage in the world by 50% of what your output originally was. Now, if you have 4 kids, you just did it by 200%. And those kids are going to have 4 kids or 2 to 4 kids. And those kids are going to, you basically have started a fucking landfill of your own, basically. So that's the shit I give them. And I go, so shut up. You had kids and your garbage is probably 4 cans and mine's barely 1. So I'm going to take a little bit of extra and I'm going to have my plastic forks. Fuck you. Am I in the ballpark or am I full of shit?
And this is like the Thanos Marvel logic of the world, like depopulation. Like I love how very quickly we've moved on to like depopulation and theorizing about genocide. Like 20 minutes in, I was like, yeah, let's stop. The Chinese tried that; it didn't go very well. What I would say is, there's 2 arguments to this, right? Like, it's very true that one of the most sustainable things you could do is have less kids, but also it's not very practical. It's pretty like dark when you get into the policy implications of that. So you can't really like legislate for it, whereas you can legislate plastic forks. So we're going to go for the low hanging fruit. Well, the thing I would say to you is like, first of all, like, why? Plastic forks taste gross. Second of all is like, we are starting to understand now, if you knew the shit that was in your plastic forks, it would blow your mind. Like a lot of the time, there's about 10,000 common additives that go into plastic.
Really?
And a lot of them now we're starting to understand, like phthalates, for example, which is this whole class of additive that goes into plastic. You go to these plastic recycling facilities, for example, and essentially they're just these huge kind of industrial facilities, loads of, conveyor belts. And like when you see garbage in large amounts, it's kind of like, it's like almost a religious experience because you realize the scale of what we're doing to the planet. You see this stuff and they chop it all up into these kind of tiny little flakes and then they melt it. But before they melt it, they kind of pour in like a barrel of this like green, mysterious ooze, and they call it master batch, which is like this really dark euphemism. It sounds like Soylent Green or something. And you're like, well, what's in it? And they're like, we don't really know. And maybe. But some of that stuff, and we now know, for example, like if you were probably around a kid at the time when they used to have things like BPA and kids, toys and bottles and these kind of things. So we're still only learning, like if you could do people have done whole books. There's a great book. It's called Slow Death by Rubber Duck, which is basically about all the shit that's in like toys and plastics every day. And it kind of talks about that. But sorry, I'm swearing. I shouldn't swear.
We probably used the part a lot, man. That was me.
But all I would say is like, we don't know what that's doing to your body, to our sperm counts, to whatever. So whereas like a metal is, a stainless steel fork is pretty inert and pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So that would be like if I could appeal to the other side of you, I'd say that. And
the thing you scared me enough. I'll probably switch now. You freak me out now.
The other thing that's kind of wild to me about plastic, when I drive along the highway or something and I see people throwing away their cartons or whatever, and it is the hedgerows, is that by some estimates they reckon that a Coke bottle now will last about 450, 500 years if left by itself.
Crap.
So when you think about the amount of stuff that we're producing and it kind of sits out there, I'm just kind of like, well, eventually we're going to get into this Wall-E. People talk about the Wall-E situation where we have to kind of flee planet Earth because there's just too much garbage around. So, but yeah,
and it's
buy yourself a plate. I'm going to send you a plate in the mail.
Well, the plates are paper.
Nice crockery.
How am I doing with the paper plates?
Paper's pretty recyclable. Yeah, as long as you're not getting it too greasy and stuff, then you can just throw it in recycling. Or it'll go in a landfill. And they're in the US, so you guys still landfill pretty much everything. So
yeah, we do. Or we just take it down to the beach and wing it in.
Exactly. Yeah. Feed it to turtles. Yeah.
We had a guy on who talked about estrogenics, and he talked about parabens and stuff like that that were in things, and you probably are familiar with that and talked about in the book. Let me ask you about my other beef that I get in arguments with people on social media for, because that's really what this show is about. how to win arguments with your book. Is are from what you found, are electronic vehicles really helping the environment?
Ooh, that's not the subject of my book. I mean, I could spout some nonsense and some opinions on it.
Did you study any of that? Is it in the book anywhere?
I mean, I think the thing that we're talking about, so industrial waste is a huge problem. And I think that one of the big points about the book is that we spend so much time agonizing and being guilty over what happens to stuff after we throw it away. Mm-hmm. But by some estimates, I think there's one estimate that comes from Canada, which is that 97% of all waste by volume is industrial waste. It's the stuff that happens before it comes to you. If you think about when you buy a hamburger, all of the wasted carcass, but also everything that cows ever eaten, and then the amount of feces that are sitting in some horrible, silage pond somewhere in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. So when you start thinking about it, it kind of becomes kind of almost mind blowing. You can't really picture it, and you think the same is true of the amount of the tonnage of the tonnage of ore that you have to dig up to get a gram of gold is astonishing. Something like 8 tons of ore or something for a single kilo of gold or something. It's crazy the amount of stuff. And you see what we've done is we've kind of offshored a lot of that so that it happens in South or Central America, or it happens in China, and you kind of don't see industrial waste and the role on that has on those environments. So I would say that's true. The most sustainable thing you can do most of the time is just not buy the new thing or buy fewer of the new things. And when we talk about cars, I probably will get in trouble with some people when I use this analogy, but the analogy that I like to use is classic car fanatics. You get these guys who have a 60s Jaguar or something, and they every weekend they're out there buffing it and waxing it and do all that kind of stuff, and quite often they've tweaked the engine or they've swapped it for something electric or more efficient. That car probably has a lower carbon emission than the guy who's kind of had a new Prius 5 times in the intervening years, right? Because the majority of the carbon emissions from that vehicle is in the manufacture. So if we all had this approach of, okay, well, let's try and buy things that we really love and they take care of them for as long as possible. And, we could talk about the right to repair movement and all this kind of stuff, because we have electronics farmers taking people to court over whether they can repair their tractors. Because one of the wild things about the tech industry now is they put all these software things in there, which basically means stuff breaks, you can't fix it. Yeah. You can't replace the battery. Which is a wild, world for us to be getting into. So if we're going to talk about things, if we're going to talk about cars, let's talk about what tech companies have done, and you can talk about obsolescence and things like that. But yeah, I'm not. Ask an EV expert, my friend.
Okay, I was just
agonize about it just as much as you do. I still drive a
wondering if you covered your book. One of the I had a joke set up somewhere in there, but one of the things is this is why I drive a 1976 Ford Honda. Anyway, but part of it is the disposable of it. When these Tesla cars burn, they burn extraordinarily hot. Sometimes they have to submerge them in a fucking pool for a week just because they're going to burn. And then a lot of the waste of these batteries, is almost a toxic waste. So I don't know if you got into that in your book or not.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Lithium batteries are, we've replaced a lot of the material. Lead batteries, for example, weren't particularly better, but lithium batteries are the plague of the waste industry, because particularly now you get people having these disposable vapes and stuff. There's batteries in basically everything now. Little earpod, your earpod gets thrown away in the bin and accidentally causes an explosion at a recycling facility because it catches on fire and sets a bale of paper on fire. So that's definitely true. The thing that's I find encouraging is that there is a lot of innovation going on in how to recycle those batteries. One of the Tesla guys quit and now runs this battery recycling technology company based out of Europe. I can't remember the name of it. Mm-hmm. But there's a huge amount of investment in that space. So I can only imagine that within a few years we'll see a lot of that recycled, and they take old EV batteries now and they turn them into batteries for homes, whatever, or solar farms and things. So there is reuse, because they're so valuable, and it's so different that a lot of these raw materials, these rare metals, it's so expensive and so damaging to get them out of the ground that we have, the metals industry, you see mining companies now, they call it urban mining, which is basically like they're getting into recycling through e-waste. And they're even talking about in some places digging up old landfills because you can strip the gold that was in like lining in old phones and old laptops and things, that because there is more gold in a ton of e-waste than there is in a ton of gold ore. Wow. So you get these kind of weird economics where all of a sudden we have gigantic mining conglomerates getting into the trash business, which I find kind of fascinating, and seeing that play out.
I've seen these guys on TikTok that they take apart like circuit boards and shit and like all sorts of stuff to get the gold off them. And some of them are after copper, of course. I think they have a meth problem. That's usually the case. But no, they're like professional copper dudes. Like they have a whole thing and they cut them open, they speed cut them. I even saw a thing that's disturbing. I don't know why it keeps showing up on my For You page on TikTok. Do I get paid for TikTok plugs here? Where these guys, and it appears to be somewhere in Africa, in one of the third world countries, it looks like they're not making a lot of money in their lives, but they're literally machete hacking open batteries, car batteries, and literally just pouring them out into the ground in a ditch that's in their office. And it's an enclosed office, so I don't even know like the chemicals and the air, and they're standing in it too. They have boots on, so they got that going for them. But I mean, just the cavalierness of just pouring these batteries over, and you're sitting there looking at the health of these people and just wondering, my God, I mean, there has to be something going on there that impacts us as humans.
Electronics waste recycling is one of the most toxic forms of waste processing that there is. And you want to talk about China, for example. For decades, a lot of the stuff that we were throwing away, like electronics wise, was getting shipped to China. Now, I'm careful not to use the word dumped here, because we weren't like dumping it. A lot of the time there was a real market for this stuff and they wanted it because it's valuable and they can repair it and resell it on the secondhand market or whatever they want to do. But one of the side effects is that you get places that you have like these towns, like there's a famous town called Guiyu in southern China, in Guangdong province, where there was so much lead in the water that it's north of 80% of all of the children had lead poisoning. And you had these rivers where they basically had to ship in bottled water because the rivers are ruined. The heavy toxic metals, cadmium, things like that. They're poisonous and will ruin you. I went to Ghana, and I went to one of the informal settlements there in Accra. Accra is the capital of Ghana, which is in West Africa, and they are one of the hubs for West Africa for the import of used electronics, textiles, and loads of other secondhand stuff. But they've become famous in the last few years, and we had a few reporters there and kind of covered it, and then there was like a flood of YouTubers that went in and took some kind of fairly gross footage. But yeah, they call them burner boys, and you get these kids who are essentially taking apart old cars or old TVs and things, and they will get a bunch of wire and they will basically put it on the end of a big stick and they'll just burn it like on an open fire on the riverbank, and you can smell the fumes from ages away. And these some of these kids are they're not even teenagers.
Are they getting high that way or something? Like,
I know, but it shows you the value. Like for these guys, copper is tremendously valuable. The scrap metal trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide. So there's value in it for them. So for them, they're making a decent living.
There you go. I need to start going back through my trash every day. What did I throw away in here?
It's true. If we knew some of the most interesting people that I met on my journey, we take the idea that you can kind of put your trash can out on a weekday morning and someone will come and collect it for granted. We are like the privileged few, right? There's 2 billion people in the world who have no form of waste collection whatsoever. Oh. So they're just literally like dumping it in the garden still, like we were like pre-Victorian era.
Yeah, so like Indians, stuff like that, where they just
I mean, I was in Varanasi. Varanasi is this holy city on the Ganges. In India, the Ganges is considered a goddess. Like it's holy. And Varanasi is this beautiful, ancient, one of the most ancient cities in the world. And you get a bunch of the tributaries of the Ganges all join there. And I went down to one of these rivers, and I am not joking to you to say that it was the entire bank was covered in plastic about a foot deep.
Holy crap.
And you had whole communities of people like basically like picking the stuff up. And it's brands, a lot of the brands you would recognize, a lot of the brands are the same companies that are trying to tell us about their recycling pledges in the West are dumping this stuff, like the filling the global South with these materials. And I would talk to these guys and they would say, oh, how much? And I'd say, how much do you make a day? And they'd be like, they make about 10 rupees a kilo, which is like a fraction of a cent.
Wow.
So if you want to, I'm going to give you something that I think kind of blows your mind, and I find the most outrageous recently, is that in the last couple of years, particularly, a bunch of companies started marketing these products, which they say are made out of ocean plastic. Have you seen these things around? You can buy like computer mice and sunglasses and like you sweat like soccer shirts.
Yeah, they're made of it.
And stuff. And they're like, they're made out of ocean plastic. And you think, that must have been fished out of the ocean. No, in the vast cases, it's actually what's called prevented ocean plastic. Now, the definition of prevented ocean plastic is any plastic collected within 50 kilometers of a major river or sea in the global South. 50 kilometers.
What the hell?
So that if you like add up, there's like something more. I think it's something like 70% of the entire world's population are like covered by this definition. So what they're actually saying is we just paid some really poor people in the third world to pick it up for you and then charged you a premium for it. But the greenwashing is just crazy. And I would meet these guys and they're not seeing the profit. Like you're buying these nice designer sunglasses, makes you feel guilt free. They're seeing none of it. So the injustice that goes on in waste in this world was shocking to me throughout this journey and still makes me mad.
It's extraordinary.
Now, as you can tell.
Now, as we round out, one of the things you bill in the book is a blueprint for building a healthier, more sustainable world. Do we need to kill all the humans for world peace and make the world sustainable?
Do I need to be worried? Do I need to be calling somebody?
I just have a joke.
The sheriff come and
hey,
check on you.
Anytime someone ever says to me, hey, we need world peace, I'm like, achieve world peace? Wow. Kill all the humans. And everybody be peaceful after that. It's us. We're the problem.
This is like the environmental prospectus practiced by like Ted Kaczynski, but I'm enjoying it. No,
only it's that other guy who would eat the people because that's more recyclable.
Yeah, that's true. It's returning nutrients to the earth. So sorry, I interrupted you. Your question is like, what's the fix?
So yeah, you offer a blueprint for building a healthier, more sustainable world. What should we do before all buried in trash?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of things which are really obvious, which are, buy less stuff that you like, buy less tat, like try and buy things that that's going to last longer and that you can repair and pass down to your kids and love. Like, I think it's very easy to people to say buy less stuff. Well, I'm actually saying just like, you can still buy stuff, just make sure it's good quality and that you can repair it and fix it. And let's make companies and ensure that companies are like that happen. And there's a bunch of great companies that are doing that, like Framework and Fairphone and all these companies kind of do stuff. So that's one example. Second thing is like we need to cut companies need to basically be punished for greenwashing, and like we need to basically be making sure that they're telling the truth with this stuff. I talk about in the book about Coca-Cola's recycling pledges they've done over the last 25 years or so. In the Coca-Cola have been pledging recycling, recycled content in their bottles since the 1990s. And every single time they've set a target, they've missed it. And they've done it, I think, 5 or 6 times over the years, and nobody ever kind of goes back and check. Wow. So there's a couple of those big things. But yeah, I could sit and tell you, make sure you buy these things. But I think the honest answer is that the place we didn't really talk about this, but one of the things that is kind of fundamental in the book is that our entire concept of waste and individual responsibility for it was essentially invented by the packaging industry in the 1950s as a way to avoid being legislated against. In the same way that the carbon footprint was invented by British Petroleum, BP, the oil company, popularized the carbon footprint. And a lot of people know that, but so we are kind of told to reduce, reuse, recycle by basically the companies producing this stuff as a way of getting away with it. And so we kind of need to, when we talk about individual action, like a lot of the time we're kind of playing into their hands. When if 97% of all waste is industrial waste, then it needs to happen kind of before it gets to us.
There you go.
So that's the thing. The thing I would say to people is like, if you want to make a difference, the places that you can make a difference are not in the Costco aisle, and they're not when you're like washing out your pizza boxes or whatever after you've had a takeaway, or you with your plastic fork. It's like the boring midweek meeting where you're like working out with a stock that you're going to buy for the next year and like choosing something slightly lower waste footprint. Like, do you know what I mean? Like if I can convince the procurement manager for like a chain of fast food restaurants, then that person is able to make decisions that much more than if every single one of your listeners started washing out their milk bottles.
There you go.
So yeah, let's try and make sure that those are the people listening, and everyone else you can kind of. I don't want to say you kind of get off scot-free, but my hope is that this book is kind of an interesting, fun, sometimes gross ride into this world that we don't think about. And the first step would be let's think about it a bit more and talk about it, and we'll go from there.
You should have smell-o-vision on the pages, so you can be like, oh, so that's what diapers smell like.
I make a long attempt at describing what landfills smell like, but the answer is I've been on a lot of them now. The one I went to in India, Gazipur, I think it's 65 meters tall or something, which I'm not sure what that is, about 200 feet tall. But you can see it from several miles away, and it looks like a mountain range.
Yeah.
Like no jokes. Like you can drive trucks like spiraling up the side to the top, and there's an entire town of people who live on it. But just trying to describe the smell of that is wild. I found out, for example, if you want a good fact, there's this chemical called cadaverine. Cadaverine is the smell of rotting corpses. There's like an actual like chemical compound.
That's my cologne. I
was gonna say, you seem like that kind of guy.
I know, it's kind of a theme. It's a callback joke going on now with the whole show, isn't it? There's a theme there. Murder. I don't know what. Go ahead. What were you saying about the cadaverine?
Yeah, cadaverine. It's the hot new scent of fall.
There you go. It was in GQ. I saw somebody have it. It's one of those things you're going through GQ and they have all the next. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna get you fired. It's not in GQ, people. That's a joke. So we've learned some really interesting stuff. What did we learn today, Kenny? I never have heard this term. I may have heard the term greenwashing, but I never probably understood what it was. I just thought it was where you scrub your vegetables. But greenwashing is a term used to describe false or misleading claims made by an organization about the positive impact that company, product, or service has on the environment. Now, they claim here that greenwashing is illegal and ethical according to the United States Federal Trade Commission, but we know how that shit works.
Yeah,
you just pay some money and it goes away.
I mean, in this country, we have the Advertising Standards Agency, and they basically you get a fine. Like if you put an advert that says something like untrue, you get a small fine, and a lot of the time that they just kind of take the L and tweak a small word and get away with it. But yeah, the reality is that the waste industry and recycling, I should say, really important. Like the environmental benefits of good recycling cannot be overstated. It creates more jobs. It's better for the planet. But a lot of the time it's just not happening. Like it's just not true. There's so much smoke and mirrors in this world. It's kind of unreal. If we want to talk about greenwashing, it's a great place to start.
What about those buying of shit people do on Amazon? I mean, I know some people, maybe personally, that have stuff that comes every day from Amazon. And there's trucks that bring it. It's like some $10 thing of salt or something, and you're like, that's they put it in like a giant box about this size for something that's about that big.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they kind of cracked down on that here recently because there was like a social media campaign which really seemed to convince them. But the thing that they got in trouble for, and I got I cover in the book, is that not a lot of people realize that when you return stuff, particularly if you're online shopping, like if you return stuff and if it's of a low enough value, they often just throw it away. Like it doesn't get resold. They can, like the logistical cost of hiring a staff to resort it. So Amazon in the UK was caught basically shipping a load of stuff that was unsold returns just straight to landfill. And they had this insane footage of, like headphones and massage guns and clothing and all this stuff just like straight in there.
Wow.
The fashion industry has been doing this for years. They have this thing called dead stock, which is like designer brands, in order to artificially inflate the value of a lot of their clothing, were just burning like anything that was unsold. They would either literally slash it or they would just throw it straight in an incinerator. And there are fast fashion brands. There's this story in the book about H&M, the fast fashion brand, producing so much clothing waste that there's a place in, I can't remember which country it is, it might be Denmark, it might be Sweden, where like they had an incinerator that like switched over to being powered by clothes. Like there's a waste to energy plant just like powered by clothing waste.
They're like providing the electricity for half the country.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
That is crazy, dude. That is crazy. Well, very insightful book. I've learned a few things. You scare me away from plastic utensils. So good job there. You've won one person over with your book, and I'm sure there'll be more. So thank you very much, Oliver, for coming to the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to send you a new fork in the mail. If any of your listeners want to chip in and get a full cutlery set, let's sort Chris out, I think.
But make sure it's got that lead base, because that lead base gives it that zing. I like that zing, man. It gives it that flashy flavor. Makes your mouth tingle a little bit, and your brain goes, ooh, and then the next morning you're like, what? Which is pretty much the story of my life. Give us a .com, Oliver, so people can find you on the internet.
Yeah, sure. You can find me at oliverfranklin-wallis.com. And as I said, the book is called Wasteland. It's out in all good bookshops now. I hope you like it.
There you go. Thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thanks to Mountains for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. You can go to wherever they are. Wasteland, The Secret World of Waste. It's a secret. And the urgent search for a cleaner future. And open up your eyes. And, really, if you want to save the planet, stop damn breeding so much. Jesus. I mean, go adopt a kid. There's plenty at the shelter. It's kind of like getting a dog. Just go get one at the shelter. They're already there. Just adopt them. Anyway, I'm just teasing you people. You can do whatever you want, because you will. So there's that. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time.